Welcome in to week 4 of the high school football season in North Carolina. You are tuned in to the HighSchoolOT postgame show presented by our partners at Talk It Out NC. Lots of thrilling games are starting to go final across the state of North Carolina. I'm Evan Moesta. I'm going to be joined in just a moment by HighSchoolOT's Joel Bryant. Tons to break down. Lots of media members across the state to join us throughout tonight's show to talk about some of the top games that went down in the state. Let's start with our Talk It Out NC scoreboard and the top 25 scores. Number 2, Huff. They were on the ropes a little bit tonight, but end up pulling away late. They have the final 2 scores of the game to break a tie with Mooresville. They win it 28-14 tonight. West Charlotte, we're going to get into a little bit more about West Charlotte once Joel Bryant joins us on the broadcast. They win tonight handily, 42-7 over Providence. Providence Day, they get a shutout victory over Butler, 39-0. Cardinal Gibbons, they're one of their closest games of the season. They pull away with a victory over Southeast Raleigh. That is 30-22 on the road, a big win for the number 5 Crusaders. Mallard Creek and Myers Park, this is a 6-7 matchup. One of a handful of top 15 matchups that we had tonight in the state of North Carolina. Comes down to the end, but ultimately, Mallard Creek wins the battle of 8A West contenders. Logan Clark's going to join us later in the show. He was at that one, and it was a thriller, 2013. Hoggard, they were all over Panther Creek. The Vikings had to battle back because Panther Creek housed the opening kick of the game, but they score 40 straight to end it, win 40-7 over the Catamounts. The Vikings are rolling. Jonas Pope IV was there, and he will join us in just a moment to talk that one. More scores from around the state. Weddington, as I mentioned, Weddington, a lot with them in West Charlotte. They get a big win tonight over Crest in a 10-11 matchup. That is 31-10 Weddington. Cleveland, all over New Bern. The Rams, they continue to win 56 consecutive regular season victories for Scott Riley and the Rams. 46-6 on the road at New Bern tonight. Independence, they pick up a big win, 26-7. The Patriots over Lake Norman. South Point, their hot start to the season. They 32-7 winners over Mount Pleasant, Ashbrook, and Marvin Ridge. That game is rolling on deep into the fourth quarter. Ashbrook clings to a 26-19 lead. Marvin Ridge had just hit a field goal that now makes that a one-score game. Tarboro and Southwest Edgecombe. Tarboro winning that one 14-0, but that game had to be cut short. There was an incident that happened at the game at Southwest Edgecombe. There are reports on WRAL TV that somebody was shot during the game. If you want to follow along with that breaking news as it's coming in, Pat Welter, who was there for WRAL Football Friday, he's reporting on that now, and you can find out more about that breaking news on WRAL TV. We move on to some more final scores from tonight on the Talk It Out NC scoreboard. In the fourth quarter, West Forsyth was up big on Mount Tabor. Brevard up big on North Buncombe. And then East Forsyth, they leave no doubt in a victory over Ragsdale tonight, 38-0. I mentioned that Hoggard game and how the Vikings are red hot as I bring in Jonas Pope now to the show. Jonas, I brought it up, but by technicality, it was a come-from-behind win for Hoggard, right?
Very good point. Very, very good point. The scoreboard might not suggest that, but yeah, Hoggard found themselves trailing like 15 seconds into the game thanks to a 90-yard kickoff return. But so yeah, technically another come-from-behind win for the Vikings. Yes, you're right.
This Hoggard team, I mean, they've been doing this to everybody this season, and you know, you start looking around at this 8A East and you talk about the Rosevilles, you talk about the Millbrooks, but the Vikings quietly are just putting together some really good victories, and they're really diverse victories across a lot of top teams are in the region.
I think that's the most impressive part, not just that they've gone to, like you said, across the region, but they've checked off Johnson County, Clayton, a top team. They've checked off Rockingham County, Richmond, a top team. Cumberland County and Fayetteville, Jack Britt, traditional powerhouse. Check them off. And then they came up to Wake County. Hey, let's check off a Wake County team with their most impressive victory so far. And when I talked to the coach after the game, he said, hey, this new 8A East, we got to test ourselves. This is why we made this tough non-conference schedule. We want to mature. We want to grow up in this slate so that when December gets around, they can refer back to these experiences of playing these top teams in non-conference play. Not to overlook their conference. They have a tough conference as well. But this slate of playing these big powerhouses and not taking any cupcakes is definitely going to prepare them for not only conference play, but where they want to be in December. And that's one of the last team standings and in the conversation with the Roseville and with the Millbrook.
Coach Craig Underwood, we had him on the show last week as he got his 100th career victory, a big win over Clayton, as you had mentioned. This team is so well coached and so well disciplined and very efficient.
Yep.
From your perspective, watching them play, what makes them this elite contender that we could see play for a state title? Because mind you, 2 years ago, they played for that 4A state championship against Weddington, and all of the pieces from that team are long gone. And so this is just a new cast of characters who are in and just picking up where, the culture has kind of left for them.
Yeah, and you talked about it. Well coached, very disciplined on both sides of the ball. They did it in all three phases. Kept Panther Creek off the scoreboard, kept the Panther Creek offense off the scoreboard. They had a punt return for a touchdown. They had a safety, and then they had three touchdowns from Boring, the quarterback. So they get it done all over the field. Very little penalties, very clean. And I spent the first half standing on the Hoggard sideline and just kind of watching the coaches, watching how they operate on the sideline. Very organized, which is kind of something that's overrated, underlooked. I'm sorry, in high school football, not overrated, underlooked in high school football. Very organized, very clean system, very clean sideline. Plays getting in and out. Coaches know what they're doing. Everyone knows their assignment. Not a lot of downside through 4 weeks for the Vikings.
Well, they do have their bye week upcoming, and they're riding it with some pretty good momentum. Still unbeaten this season are the Hoggard Vikings. 40 straight points unanswered tonight in a victory on the road at Panther Creek. That was Jonas Pope IV. If you have not already, head over to HighSchoolOT.com and check out his story, his quotes, and his interviews with several players and coaches from Hoggard. Thanks for joining us tonight, Jonas.
Appreciate it, Evan.
We roll on here on the High School OT postgame show. Let's take a look at some scores from around the state of North Carolina and in the 704 area code. Charlotte Catholic, a thriller with Kings Mountain tonight. The Cougars hold on for a 28-21 victory over the Mountaineers. Palisades coming away with a 14-7 win over Chambers. Charlotte Latin, a big victory against Metrolina Christian at 42-13. Charlotte Country Day, 38-14 winners over Covenant Day. East Lincoln, their offense continues to be a juggernaut. They lead Bandy's big. Community School of Davidson, a shutout win over West Stoke. Sun Valley picking up a win over Monroe, 28-7. That is a big win for Sun Valley. Shelby, they continue to roll. Not quite 90 points like last week, but 49-14 is the final as they defeat West Lincoln. Statesville defeated Alexander Central by a pair of scores. Porter Ridge picking up a 31-6 win over South Iredell. A thriller down in Mecklenburg County. South Meck, 28-27. They hold on and defeat Ardrey Kell in overtime. And then Ballantine Ridge, 49-14 win over Garinger. That is the first victory in school history for the Wolves. We'll have more on that later in the show. But for now, I am going to bring in Joel Bryant. Joel, I had mentioned early as we were going through some top 10 scores, top 25 scores, there's a lot of news that happened in the 704 area code that will shake up the 7A and the 8A classifications. And that is the playmaking athlete on both sides of the ball at West Charlotte, Katie Cotton, who helped lead the Lions to a 3A state title last year. He is a Duke commit over the summer. We had not seen him play this year, but then earlier today on social media, he made the announcement that he plans to transfer over and play at Weddington. What is your initial reaction to this news, Joel? And obviously you've had a chance to kind of digest some scores from today and then also hear from some sources that you have over at Weddington. What's just kind of the temperature on this news as it came across your timeline?
Well, it was obviously shocking. You don't expect to see a player, one of the best players on a top 3 team in the state, transfer midseason to another top 10 team in the state. We're talking about someone who has been kind of the lifeblood of West Charlotte for the past 3 years. Coach Griner swore up and down by Katie Cotton. He kind of was a big part of that program's revival and shifted him to becoming a state champion. They won the 3A state championship last year. So this is about as stunning of a piece of news you can get. during the middle of the season. He's committed to Duke. He's probably going to play defensive back there. And then all of a sudden, he's going from the number 3 team in the state, an 8A team in West Charlotte, over to Weddington, the 7A team. It's a lot. It's a lot. Why I was told from people at Weddington is they weren't expecting this. Of course, like that's what you kind of expect them to say, but I do tend to believe the person I was talking to there. It's kind of a weird one. We're not probably going to figure out what exactly happened for a while. The question now is, will Katie Cotton become eligible? If so, when? And if he doesn't become eligible, that's another question to kind of just like personally, like, I mean, if you go to a school, mid-year, you're not able to play. I mean, what was it for, right? So that's going to be the big story here, is figuring out what happens with KD Cotton if he becomes eligible. And just based off, the scores tonight, it doesn't seem like he's really needed at Weddington. They crushed Crest tonight. Wasn't particularly close. Adding him to that offense will be another weapon for them to use between Kelson Tate and John Manley. They kind of have a similar weapon already there. But defensively, I would say if you can add KD Cotton to that safety room for Weddington, that's going to take that defense to the next level when they're eventually probably going to face a Grimsley and a face on Brandon or Brody Lowe. They're going to need that kind of help, I would think. So very curious to see if KD Cotton becomes eligible. This is a story that we're going to be following because it's unlike anything we've seen lately.
Yeah, and NCHSA to NCHSA, both being top 10 teams in the state of North Carolina. You're right, it's uncharted territory. I mean, we saw a lot of people are talking about Kendra Harrison last year, where he went from Providence Day back to Reedsville. It was a little bit different situation because it's NCISA to NCHSA, or even a situation like Eli Hamrick last year, who was at AC Reynolds and now the quarterback, ironically, at Crest. His family being displaced because of Hurricane Helene last year forced him to move schools. But definitely uncharted territory. And, the Lions, I think they continue to be fine. A 42-7 win today. Again, they had been without his services for a lot of this season and had played some really competitive games, including some overtime games that they fell against South Point from South Carolina, and then Grimsley, obviously, in week 1, and that was a nail-biter. And I think you look back at that Grimsley final, and you're like, man, Katie Cotton didn't play. Like, what could have been if he did?
It came down to like literally one play at the end of the game.
Yeah. Talking about games that came down to some big plays, J. Mike Blake had the high school OT game of the week presented by Alpaca Chicken. That was a close game, and Northeastern had to hold on at the very end in that one and survive with a win over Wilson Prep, even though for a lot of that game, it felt as if the Eagles were kind of in the driver's seat. J. Mike now joins us here on the High School OT postgame show. What exactly happened in that game that kept Wilson Prep within striking distance? Because it was a close game early, and then it felt like once Northeastern created some separation, they didn't really look back, but Wilson Prep was just scrappy.
Yeah, I think so. As I sit here kind of writing my game story from the press box, my first line is Wilson Prep was never out of the game, but Northeastern was always in control. And Northeastern, would kind of leave the door open a little bit. Wilson Prep would take advantage of that and go right in there and, big plays, right? They would have these 2-play touchdown drives and stuff like that. And all of a sudden it's a 7-point game again or an 8-point game. And I mean, I even called it before one of their touchdowns. They had a 62-yard touchdown. And right before, I was like, Wilson Prep has always been in it tonight. They've always made a play to keep themselves alive. What happens very next play, 62-yard touchdown. So I think for me, like a lot of respect was gained for Wilson Prep. They've played teams bigger than themselves all throughout this year, but no game was closer than this one. And I think Northeastern walks away going, man, that was a tough team. They never went away. But also Northeastern, I think about themselves, they're like, hey, we got our running game going tonight. When we needed to take that 7-point lead, 8-point lead, make it 15 again, we were able to do that. There were different times when both sides kind of answered the bell, if you will. It was a long game because we had a lot of penalties and stuff, but ultimately I think both teams got better tonight, and it was, I think, pretty entertaining for the folks who watched this one online.
Both quarterbacks definitely did their part. Zach Ishman, the quarterback for Northeastern, obviously he's thrown for a ton of yards this year. I believe he passed over the 1,000-yard passing threshold tonight. Ran for 3, though, And then Trayvon Usher, the do-it-all quarterback for Wilson Prep. I was actually at the first quarter of this game, and Usher really had put his stamp on this game pretty early on.
Yeah, and to Northeastern's credit, I think they kind of bottled him up after that 70-yard touchdown run that you saw in the first quarter. But Usher does have the scrambling ability. He's not 100%. You can kind of tell based on us seeing him in the preseason and seeing him now. He's played bigger teams, and any coach of a 1A or 2A or 3A that's playing the bigger schools will tell you, I hope we get better and we stay healthy. Wilson Prep doesn't have a whole lot of depth. A lot of guys who made plays on defense tonight were freshmen. So having Usher kind of like take his lumps a little bit, I think he wasn't as fresh as you would like to have him in the fourth quarter. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot of 1A teams that have some trouble with him later on this year for sure. Nasir Vines stepped up big. He had a 40. Wilson Prep gets a interception on a screen play. They go 2 plays, 48 yards, or 2 carries, 49 yards. 48-yard run by Nasir Vines, 1-yard run Nasir Vines. All of a sudden, it's an 8-point game again. They would just kind of do little things like that, and then of course at the end, they call a halfback pass, back-to-back plays. It appeared to be Ethan Nelson. This was not like the receiver's wide open. He kind of dropped it into a crowd, and Israel Taylor comes up with it. But I know I'm talking a lot about Wilson Prep, but I think it's important that people know, like, this is not a typical 0-4 team. Okay,
it's probably the best 0-4 team in the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, I think that's a title they could easily claim. Yeah. When you go up against a 7A, 4A, and now 2 3As. Northeastern, most of the year they've aired it out with Zach Ishman, like you mentioned. Tonight, even though 210 in the air is good, they got Damari McNeil going on the ground. He had almost 10 yards a carry, 14 carries, 133 yards, and 1 touchdown. And I think the more that they can do that, the better off they'll be. I don't think Northeastern wants to be in a position where they're asking Ishman to go out there and throw it 40 times a game. He threw it 34 times tonight. But the way they moved it on the ground, I don't know if he necessarily had to. And Wilson Prep has good defensive backs, but Wilson Prep is also kind of thin on depth, where if you can tire out that front 7, go for that. And I think Northeastern figured that out later on in the game, which is why they were always able to have that comfortable balance, that comfortable margin over the Tigers, really from about the end of the second half or in the second quarter onward. They scored like 2 times in the final 4 minutes of the second quarter, take a 1-point deficit and turn it into a 15-point lead at halftime. And that was the margin they needed. And they were able to kind of ground and pound a little bit. If that's what they picked up from this game, that's very helpful, because the 3A East to me is, and Joel can speak better to this, his contenders that he thinks, but I'm still thinking like Northeastern has got the goods to win the 3A East, but they're going to have to diversify and kind of look like the complete team that they did last year, despite their heavy losses from last year. Doing it on the ground with Damari McNeil is a good thing to have for them to emerge in this one and here in week 4.
Yeah, Damari McNeil, has some good bloodlines. His father, one of the most elite rushers in state history. Again, Northeastern, 41-32 winners tonight over Wilson Prep. J. Mike Blake had that call on the High School OT Game of the Week, presented by Alpaca Chicken. Thanks, J. Mike.
No problem.
We roll on now here in the High School OT postgame show, presented by Talk It Out NC. I'm going to bring in Joel Bryant, who is going to be joined by Randy Capps from Joco Sports.
Hey, Randy, how's it going?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing good. Hey, which games were you monitoring tonight?
I watched a lot of Princeton and North Johnston, just an absolute barn burner in the northern part of the county. And I kept an eye on Cleveland and New Bern and Clayton and West and a little bit of South and Midway. I kind of did the prep red zone thing tonight with my various streams and audio feeds.
I was watching the Cleveland game as well. Cleveland comes away with a 46-6 win over New Bern. On Max Reps, New Bern was a top 15 team in the state coming into this week. Cleveland thoroughly dominated them. Quick impressions from Cleveland tonight.
They continue to roll. I mean, New Bern's schedule to me a tad soft. I mean, West Craven is decent. The other 2 wins, not that impressive. Cleveland just has sort of reloaded the gun, so to speak. And Owen Holbert, 4 more touchdown passes tonight, really looking impressive. He's really sort of made a big progression from his sophomore to his junior season, and just in time for the Rams, who look like every bit as good as they've been over the past few years.
Yeah, I agree. This is a team that's a very impressive coaching job by Coach Riley and staff with the amount of turnover they had from last year. Curious to see how they keep going here. I did want you to go into that Princeton North Johnson game. I know you're watching that one closely. Tell us all about that one.
Just an absolute wild game. 48-46, Princeton, the final. Teo McFadder, 5 rushing touchdowns, a passing touchdown, and 5 of the 6 2-point conversions. The last touchdown scored
and he's a sophomore, people. He's a sophomore.
Yeah, sophomore, right. The last touchdown, no time left on the clock. They got a first down inside the 2 with about 3 seconds to go. The clock briefly hit 0. There was pandemonium. They did not stop the clock for the gaining of the first down, so they had to go back and put some time on. McFadder puts it into the end zone, ties it at 46, and then scores the 2-point conversion. The difference in the game, a 2-point conversion attempt that was not successful from North way back in the first quarter. So it was basically just nip and tuck all night long. And North hasn't beaten Princeton since 2016. Almost had them tonight, but the Bulldogs just a little bit too tough.
That one is approaching kind of basketball score territory. Still a couple months away from those kind of scores, but very exciting one. I'm curious, now we're 4 weeks in, and especially after watching this game, between Princeton being in 3A, they're in the Swine Valley 2A, 3A, and then North Johnson being 4A in the – I'm still trying – what's the name of that conference, Randy?
No, North is in the 3 Rivers.
The 3 Rivers. We're still learning here. So
as we go, right.
Do you have any different impressions on how they kind of figure into those 2 different leagues here?
I think North is going to be very competitive in the 3 Rivers. They're very good offensively and sneaky good on defense, although, Princeton makes teams look less good than they really are defensively sometimes. And as for Princeton, fantastic offensively, not great defensively. And we've seen that in the early season from the Bulldogs. They lost, of course, at East Duplin 42-20. They've hammered everybody else pretty much. But basically, Princeton will go as far as McFadder can take them, and that's probably pretty far based on where they're lining up these days classification-wise.
Yeah, well, he's quite a player to lead you. It's very impressive for a sophomore what he's doing. Randy, any other notes from the other games you're monitoring tonight?
I watched the end of Midway and South. South Johnston was able to hold on. They got a defensive touchdown that ended up being the difference in the game. Midway able to score with about 4.5 minutes left in the game. The 2-point conversion unsuccessful. South able to run out the clock and go to 2-1 on the season. And, of course, Clayton bouncing back nicely after the loss at Hoggard last week. 300 yards rushing, 3 defensive touchdowns, and a romp over West Johnston. I expected the Comets to be a little angry, and they certainly were tonight against West Johnston.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, Randy, I appreciate your time. Where can people find your work at this week?
We're on jocosports.com. We have the podcast as well in the top corner of the screen. We break down every game in Johnston County every week, so give us a listen.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Randy, and best of luck here next week.
Thanks a lot, man. Take care.
Next, we're going to be joined by Tim Howard, who saw a very impressive performance by Laney tonight. Tim, looking for Tim here. Tim is not coming up. I hear Tim. If we can hear Tim, we can talk. Tim, can you hear me?
I can.
All right. So tell me.
I'm trying to restart my video.
No, it's all good. We'll
Okay.
Let's talk. Tell me about the Laney performance. So Laney started out kind of rough this year, but they've battled back here the past couple of weeks, and they come away with a big win over a South Central team that was undefeated. Just take us through this whole Laney game against South Central.
Yeah, I think, like you said, first 2 weeks of the season, just 7 points in both of those losses. Last week put up some numbers against Greenville Rose, and then again tonight with another nice offensive performance, really balanced, 157 rushing yards, 163 passing yards. So good balance there. The drive for me that kind of turned the momentum completely into Laney's favor was they got the ball back with 1:01 left on their own 6-yard line, up 10-0. To go into halftime in the end of the second quarter, and instead of just kneeling on the ball, taking that 10-0 lead into halftime, Steve Brooks, like he often has done, goes goes big and allows his offense to march down the field. It took them 5 plays. They went 94 yards, and they scored on a 40-yard pass with 1.7 seconds left before halftime. So that gave them a 17-0 lead, and then they were able to pretty much cruise in the second half. So yeah, I mean, they're back to 2-2, and the way the conference is looking right now, it's certainly not. In terms of wins, the conference doesn't have a ton of them right now. So Laney sitting at 2-2 is actually looking pretty good in the Carolina Coast Conference.
So for those that don't know, Laney made a very kind of late hire when they brought in Steve Brooks to be the head coach. Luke Little left for an out-of-state job pretty much towards the end of the offseason. But Laney brings in Steve Brooks after a bit of a process, probably a longer process than you'd like for a late offseason change. But how much do you factor in that late change and Brooks getting acclimated to his new kids and just kind of new setup there? How much do you attribute that to the slow start in the first couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think I actually talked to him about that after the game and said, do you feel like, you can kind of just maybe throw away those first 2 weeks and now it's like the team that you expected, and he totally agreed with it. He said he's still learning things about his players and where to put them into positions to be successful. So I think even at this point in the season, where most teams 4 weeks into the season are pretty comfortable with what kind of personnel they have, at Laney, it's still a bit of a work in progress. So the fact that they've been able to win 2 of these 4 games, going into conference play, I think they're on the right trajectory right now, and maybe they can compete. Certainly Hoggard, with what they've done over the first 4 weeks of the season, I think is clear and above everybody else in the conference. But certainly Laney is right there for that kind of number 2 spot behind Hoggard.
Yeah, I'm starting to agree with you there. Tim, before we go here, we already talked about the Hoggard game a bit earlier, but any other games from your area that kind of stood out to you final score-wise?
Yeah, Pender Wallace Rose Hill was a game I was kind of following along with. The Laney game was kind of out of hand, so I saw that Pender and Wallace Rose Hill were in overtime, so put that on my phone on NFHS Network. It was a double overtime game. Pender winning 32-26. So both teams scored in the first overtime session. Neither one got the 2-point conversion. Pender opened with a rare passing touchdown in the second overtime. Did not get the 2-point conversion, but they stopped Wallace Rose Hill on the 1-yard line on 4th down to get that win, 32-26. I know you and Jay Mike were just talking about 3A, how Northeastern, you got James Keenan in there, Whiteville. Hey, maybe Pender wants to throw their name into the mix a little bit in the 3A East.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Well, Tim, we always appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on here and telling us about your area. What can people expect from coastalpreps.com this week?
Yeah, going to have some recaps of all these games tonight. Ashley also picked up their first win. They scored with 15 seconds left to beat Fike 45-42. So I've got some exciting games to write about, and then the games that I can't quite get to tonight, I'll do a weekend review tomorrow, and that's a free on 3 day. I do something called free on 3 days, so people can go to coastalpreps.com tomorrow. And even if you're not a subscriber, you can read my weekend review.
Awesome. Well, Tim, appreciate it again, and best of luck with your coverage this week. We're going to take a quick break here on the HighSchoolOT Postgame Show, brought to you by Talk It Out NC.
Raising kids is a roller coaster. Sometimes you laugh, sometimes you cry, but most times you wonder how your kid turned out so well. That's how. You did the hard work, made the right decisions, like talking about alcohol before it could be a problem. Go to talkitoutnc.org. Get resources on how to talk about underage drinking. So Mom, Dad, keep up the good work. It's worth it. Talk early. Talk often. Talk it out, NC.
Welcome back to the HighSchoolOT postgame show presented by our partners at Talk It Out NC. As we mentioned early on, we were going through the 704 scoreboard, and we mentioned Ballantyne Ridge, their first win in program history tonight. 49-14 over Garinger. And we are joined by the head coach of the Wolves, Tyson Fernandez, who joins us here on the High School OT postgame show. Coach, congratulations. And when you saw that clock hit 0 there, what was that feeling like, knowing that your guys were able to come away with a big victory? Oh, here we go. Hey, Coach, how are you? You able to hear us, Coach? We're going to take just a second here, let him work on his microphone, get up and running here. Another score, Tim Hauer, we were just talking to him about the 910 area. He had mentioned James Keenan as a contender there. Leica Abibi was out at James Keenan, who took on East Duplin tonight. Leica, a big win in that one. How did that game transpire for you tonight?
It was a fantastic fantastic finish. It felt like James Keenan was going to run away with it, but East Duplin responded quite nicely in the second half, only for the Tigers to respond and get a big win. And I think they certainly are going to have their say in the 3A East, which seems to be shaping up into quite the competitive division.
27-21, the final score in that one. It is James Keenan coming away with a big win over East Duplin. Leica Abibi joins us. He was at that one. What was kind of the turning point in this game tonight, Leica?
Well, it really came down to how well James Keenan started the game, defensively especially. The East Duplin offense, which had played really well through their first 3 games, and they were undefeated, of course, going into tonight's game before the Tigers won. But the Tigers defense really set the tone early, forcing 2 3-and-outs. The offense scored on 2 of their first 3 drives, and they came out in the second half, forced a 3-and-out, and scored a touchdown right away to go up 21-0. And it was really a balanced rushing attack from them throughout the evening. East Duplin did, like I said, they scored 2 touchdowns in 1:17 to get back in the contest, but the Tigers did a great job responding. They settled down in the fourth quarter, and when it mattered most, they leaned again on that rushing attack to get it done.
Well, Leica is going to have more from this game in just a little bit on HighSchoolOT.com, including highlights and a story. Leica, we thank you for joining us and helping break down the big win for James Keenan tonight. A close battle with East Duplin down in the 910. James Keenan coming away with the victory tonight, 27-21. Thanks, Leica.
Thank you, Evan.
I had mentioned Coach Tyson Fernandez from Ballantyne Ridge. He joins us here. Coach, the first win in program history for you. What is that feeling like for you and your players when that clock hits 0, and know that the work that you guys have put in over the last 2 seasons had finally kind of culminated in a victory? I think we might still be having a couple issues there. I'm going to bring Joel Bryant back into the show here. Joel, seeing that Ballantyne Ridge, score, what stands out there? Obviously, 49 points scored tonight is more than they had all of last season. A marquee win, and obviously Coach Fernandez, this is his first season at the helm of the program, and he was a part of the program last year. Now being the head coach, how big of a win is that for Ballantyne?
Well, it's huge because that Garinger team is playing with more confidence this year. So I was very curious about this matchup between Ballantyne and Garinger. I was really curious who was going to win it, and for Ballantyne to win kind of that authoritatively, I mean that's pretty impressive. Scoring more points in one game tonight than they did all of last season. I know last season was kind of rough, and then they had the coaching change this offseason. Coach Redding left after the first season to go take a college job. Coach Fernandez was on that staff though last year as the defensive coordinator, and they promoted him from within. He had previously been the head coach at Rocky Mount, so that's a very good win for the program. I think we got Coach Fernandez back.
I believe we do. Coach, can you hear us here?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
There we go.
There's our guy.
Listen, my laptop, my school laptop didn't want to work all of a sudden, but now it's working. We're good now. I'm using my phone.
Coach,
Hey,
seeing that final score, or seeing the clock hit 0, we were talking a little bit about how, your fingerprints have been on this program for the last 2 years, even though this is your first as head coach. How proud of you when you just saw that clock hit 0 and that your kids got to just kind of bask in the moment of their first ever win?
Oh man, it was amazing. I got emotional. It was one of those things where, every single hard work moment, all those long practices, those moments where you looked into their eyes and they're just trying to find an answer and trying to figure out why is it not happened yet. It was all for this one moment where they were able to kind of look at the scoreboard, celebrate, get together, and just enjoy being, a winning team for the first time ever.
You mentioned how, it was kind of weighing on them a bit, for it taking so long. I guess, what was it? It did take 13, 14 games. That's really, in the grand scheme of things, that's not the worst we've seen from a new program. But how do you expect the kids' demeanor? How do you expect just kind of the vibe and practice to change now that this win is kind of off their shoulders?
I mean, you could definitely, it was starting to weigh on them for sure. I think the interactions at school, I think that was the toughest part, is because the team at practice was always working hard. That's the best thing about it, that they made coming to work every single day an enjoyable experience, because those guys were going to give us everything they had. But it's starting to get to that point. The conversations, at lunch, the conversations in class. Hey, when are you guys going to finally get a win? When are you guys going to do this? It hurts, when a kid is working to get to this point and to get this win. And when it doesn't happen on Friday night, it's tough. And you got to look at your classmates on Monday morning, and the snarks, the comments, and things like that. They cut deep. But now these guys have that experience now. Now they know what it feels like, and I told them they can hold their head high on Monday for sure.
Awesome. Hey, Coach, before we let you go, tell me about a couple of guys tonight who made some of the biggest plays in school history.
Man, listen, we'll be posting out some highlights for sure. But Ace Alexander, senior for us, made, I think, a Sports Center top 10 level catch for us going into the halftime. We had 3 turnovers defensively. We were able to impose our will at times. Ryder coming back from a little bit of an injury just to finish the game out. Ryder Polson, our quarterback, doing a phenomenal job. Our offensive line, man, they have gotten the brunt of every single week. And these guys just found a way to make it gel tonight. And I'm really, really proud of that offensive line gelling together and fighting through and making it happen. And of course, these young men and this coaching staff, these guys poured in so many long hours trying to get this thing right. And I can't do it without them, man. And they're phenomenal. They're a phenomenal group of guys.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Coach, I'm glad we get you in here to the HighSchoolOT postgame show. Really appreciate your time. And I'm curious to see how you guys build off this. Curious to see how the rest of the season goes for you, and best of luck the rest of the way.
I really appreciate it, gentlemen. Y'all have a good night.
You as well.
Some scores from around the state of North Carolina right now. We go to the 919 area code and look at some of the top results from there. Garner picking up a big win over D.H. Conley, 50-19 tonight. We spoke to Randy Capps earlier in the show about Clayton and West Johnson. It was a big win for the Comets, 55-2. Apex Friendship, they shut out Holly Springs 31-0. Fuquay Varina 20-7 winners over Willow Spring. That was a big battle in the southwestern part of the county. Middle Creek, just up the road, 59-36 win over Eastern Wayne. Hillside shuts out Orange tonight, 38-0. Green Hope, a 44-0 victory over Northern Durham. That number 4 really big for the Falcons. In just a moment, we'll bring in Clay Best, who is there to tell us more on that one. As Randy Capps had mentioned, Princeton, a thriller, 48-46 over North Johnston tonight. Apex, they hold on late. The Cougars were up 17-0. They defeat Chapel Hill, who was looking to go 4-0. That is the first win for the Cougars under their new head coach. Wake Forest, an emotional victory for the Cougars tonight over Wakefield, 42-7. Wake Forest gets the road victory for their head coach, Reggie Lucas. If you had not heard earlier this week, Coach Lucas' wife had passed away And there's news on that on High School OT, ways that you can support the Lucas family. Go on to HighSchoolOT.com, learn more about how you can support head coach Reggie Lucas, the Wake Forest football program, in a really, really tough time that nobody wants to see happen in their family, and especially in the high school football world. So big win tonight for the Cougars, 42-7 over Wakefield. East Wake, they escape Bunn 28-26, and then Seaforth, they pick up a win 34-14 against Northwood. That's a big win for the Hawks, their first ever over the county rivals at Northwood. I mentioned that Apex Chapel Hill game. The Cougars holding on, a big victory, tons of elation there, 17-10 over Chapel Hill. Tyler Clark was at that game for High School OT. I'm also going to bring in Joel Bryant to talk a little bit about this one with Tyler as well. Tyler, that was a pretty special game there for Apex, especially when the clock hit 0.
Man, it came down literally to the last play. I mean, the quarterback got pressured. Apex defense played outstanding, and the quarterback got pressured last second like he was all game, and it was an air throw, and after that, the game was over.
Hey, so Tyler, this was kind of a turning point game, right? So Apex comes in 0-3. Chapel Hill comes in 3-0. This is kind of a make it or break it game for Apex, I was thinking. What did you hear from Coach Frank after the game, and just how nice was it for him, getting that first win of his career? What did you kind of get from him?
Getting the vibe from Coach Frank, it just seemed like a weight was lifted off his shoulders. Because, getting that first win of the season this late in, it's just kind of like, when are you going to get it? When are you going to get it? And that now that he finally got it, I feel like they're going to play a lot more loose going throughout the season. So it'll be interesting to see how they play throughout the season.
I know that was a pretty big celebration at the end. Did you hear from any players what they were saying at the end of the game that they got their first win of the season?
They were all just really excited that they got a win, especially that it was an away game. Yeah. And they're all excited for next week.
So, Tyler, you're a Durham guy. Chapel Hill is in this conference with Durham schools. It's called the Tobacco Road 6A, 7A. How do you see them kind of fitting in here? There's also East Chapel Hill, Northern Durham, Hillside, Riverside, and Southern Durham. How do you see them kind of fitting into this conference when we get into conference play here?
Chapel Hill is always going to be tough. Their quarterback, to me, really stood out to me. He was a dual threat guy, and he really did it all tonight. I feel like they'll hold their own. I feel like the Durham team might get the slight edge, but that might be a little biased, But I feel like it could go either way.
And for Apex, can you see them taking a next step the rest of the season now that this kind of weights off their shoulders?
I do believe that next week will be the measuring stick for both squads, for Jordan and for Apex. So we'll see after next week where both the teams fall.
Awesome. Well, Tyler, I appreciate it. We're going to hear more from Tyler tonight in High School OT. He's going to have a recap for us and some interviews as well. Tyler, appreciate your time, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you, Joel.
We talked earlier in this about there were so many top 15 matchups, Joel, across the state.
Yeah.
One of which had huge implications on the 8A West. That happened down in
matchup.
Oh yeah, top 10, 6 versus 7. Kids would really like that one, 6-7. But a big one, number 6, Myers Park, falling to number 7, Mallard Creek. Logan Carter was at that game for High School OT. He joins us now. Logan, Mallard Creek was very impressive for you watching them tonight. What was it about Mallard Creek that allowed them to escape with a close win over Myers Park?
Yeah, it was really impressive tonight. Myers Park got out to a 10-0 lead in 6 minutes of play for Myers Park against Mallard Creek. And last week, Mallard Creek, they also struggled a little bit in that big loss. It was a huge loss last week, and we were really shocked, Rich and I. We were really shocked at how Mallard Creek being 10-0 down to start the game, they just immediately surrounded each other, talked to each other on the sideline, and really pushed through the perseverance. The O-line was absolutely phenomenal tonight. They just enforced their will on Myers Park in the second half. They had 3 rushing touchdowns. 2 sophomore running backs that I want to highlight is Xavier Edmond and Joshua Pearson. Xavier Edmond had the 2 rushing touchdowns tonight, but both of them were fantastic. They just wouldn't go down. And they just really motivated the team in the second half. And just like I said, the O-line was just lights out in that second half. Also want to give a shout out to Sam Cheeseborough. They were switching running backs tonight between him and Kalen Napier, but he punched one in to take the lead tonight for Mallard Creek. I also want to shout out the defense for Mallard Creek. You know, they allowed a kickoff return that was about 55 yards to start the game, and then they threw one over the top to Brody Key for Myers Park that he caught 45 yards to start the game. They acted like it never happened, and they were lights out the rest of the game. There's one guy I wanted to really shout out, number 2, Deuce, just was all over the backfield tonight. Every single play that was for a loss, he was in on the play for Mallard Creek tonight.
Oh, Deuce Majette, yeah, senior linebacker. That's a good call, Logan. Hey, so Kenny Tinsley, the head coach, is a triad guy. You're a triad guy. Kenny Tinsley was at Southeast Guilford when they had that nice run back in the late 2010s. What did he tell you after the game when you talked to him?
He was just ecstatic. Rich, my colleague over here that's with me at some of the games, he talked to him during the interview and just asked him about that perseverance. They got a young group. You wouldn't expect that from a young group. And he just gave it up to his guys. We asked him, what were you saying on the sideline? And he said it was just his players talking to each other about, hey, we're still in this game. It means nothing, like that they're up 10-0. We can get back in at any time. So he really gave it up to his young guys because he said, at the beginning of the year, it's either going to be good or bad when you got a group of really young guys like he does. But he really wanted to shout out the defense as well and his defensive coordinator.
So this was your first impression, I guess, of the new 8A classification. I know Rich saw West Forsyth against Grimsley. I'm curious, what are you kind of expecting out of this 8A come playoff time now that you saw this one, which could be a preview of a playoff matchup again?
I think it's definitely a preview of a playoff matchup. I was blown away by both teams tonight. Just how Myers Park came out right out the gate, firing. I mean, they played a phenomenal game in that first half, and then just as I said, that O-line and the run game just imposed their will, and then the defense, like I said, from Mallard Creek picked it up. But I could easily see Myers Park back in that game and winning that game. It was phenomenal. So I'm really impressed with that conference, and I'm looking forward to attending more games out of that division.
Awesome. Hey, before we go, does Rich have any big hot takes from the game?
You got any hot takes?
No, just that the 2 sophomore running backs for Charlotte, you better watch these guys in the next couple of years. They are phenomenal running backs and run with a lot of strength and quickness, and I was very impressed by both of them.
Awesome. Well, guys, we really appreciate your work for us. Logan and Rich have been doing great stuff for years with Game of Inches. They're helping us out here. Guys, really appreciate you taking the trip down there to Charlotte for us, and looking forward to seeing your stuff later tonight.
Appreciate it, guys.
All right. Evan, where are we going next? We're going to the scoreboard, guys.
Yep, let's go to Scoreboard Radio. Jeff Link and David Jones join us now here on the show. Guys, you guys had an exciting one tonight. We were listening into the call here in the office as you guys had your broadcast tonight. Tell us about the result, the final score, and how it all transpired.
Well, a close game for us for once. It only took 4 weeks to not have a 50-point blowout, but a couple of 1 and 2 teams getting together, pretty evenly matched teams, and really just a game of guts tonight. North Gaston losing their starting quarterback, Camden Canup, early in that game, and Kishard Wright coming in and backup service. South Caldwell defense really playing lights out tonight. South Caldwell gets the win, 16-12. Pretty much hit their season average in rushing and passing. It did come down to the end, though. A couple of crazy, questionable non-completions, and with 4 seconds to go from the 15-yard line, North Gaston had trailed the whole game, completed a pass to the back line of the end zone, but the back judge there with a clear shot, the receiver, as he's falling down, lands on his seat on the back line of the end zone, and South Caldwell holds on 16-12. Just a good Friday night football game, inside the confines of a tough week for a lot of reasons for America. And it was something we needed, and kind of hopefully a season correction for South Caldwell. They got TC Roberson next week. It's going to be tough for North Gaston to recover from this one. It was a heartbreaker from them, but really a mood lifter in Sawmills for the Spartans.
We had talked about this last week, but for Coach Casey Justice and this team, you guys felt like this week was going to be a defining week for the identity of this year's South Caldwell team, because they came out so hot in week 1 against West. Caldwell had stumbled the last 2 weeks, but as you said, a big win tonight. What is kind of the morale? Was that a big pick-me-up that they need to kind of vault them into what is going to be the back half of their season?
Yeah, they lost their starting center, Parker Cobb, coming into this week, and so they went a lot more under center. That was the most I've seen South Caldwell go under center under Casey Justice's tenure. But you're right. I think for this team, and I said it in our pregame show tonight, if they lose this game, I don't know where their season goes. And it was one of those games where South Caldwell, you felt like dominated the game, but North Gaston just kept hanging around, gave themselves a chance to win. And had North Gaston, had that pass been called a catch and a touchdown, I don't think South Caldwell recovers from it. I think it was a very fragile point. Now, let's make no bones about it. I don't think South Caldwell is going to go beat Watauga. I don't think they're going to go beat Freedom. But this gives them a little bit. You keep that locker room together. You get a little bit of hope there for this team that they can keep themselves together. Next week's going to be tough, but South Caldwell's tough at home. Dating back to last season, this was 4 wins in their last 5 home games. The only loss in that stretch was the season ender to Watauga last year. So they play well at home. They have TC Roberson at home. But when you look up and down the Northwestern 6A, 7A conference, again, it's Watauga and it's Freedom. And then you can throw everybody else in there. St. Stephen's has shown some good signs, but they struggle tonight with a very bad North Iredell team. You've got Alexander Central that's now 1-3 out of the gate. McDowell gets a big win tonight over Avery, but that's not a game they've lost in the past. That's a 7A school going up against one of the smaller schools in the western half of the state. They should win that one. So where is South Caldwell going to fall? So you hope that this gives them some momentum going into that conference slate, that it's Watauga, Freedom, and then everybody else, and maybe they can be that everybody else, that third team in that conference.
So a bit of a preview for next week. I heard you guys kind of debating this one on your broadcast tonight. So you have the potential 6A playoff matchup with AC Reynolds and Freedom. AC Reynolds was down at Murphy tonight, ended up winning big, and Freedom kind of a tough game tonight against TC Robertson. But you also have kind of what's going to be a conference championship game, most likely between High Brighton and East Rutherford. What did you guys decide? Did you work it out over the broadcast?
So those two conferences that we cover most closely, the Western Piedmont 3A, 4A, Northwestern 6A, 7A, they're very similar in that there's 2 clear teams at the top. The Northwestern Conference is better after that. There doesn't seem to be a lot behind High Brighton and East Rutherford, but those 2 conferences work out to where the 2 front runners play the first game of the conference schedule. And so with all due respect to everybody else in those conferences, the High Brighton East Rutherford game should decide the Western Piedmont 3A, 4A. I mean, if nobody gets hurt and everything plays out, that should be your conference champion. So that's on the table. I thought Freedom would roll tonight. That makes the AC Freedom game a little more intriguing next week.
Yeah.
But the week after that, you've got Freedom and Watauga. And again, that looks to settle that conference early. So, we've got to run it by the brass and go by the retinal scanner and go into the vault and get out a bunch of money. And we got to figure it out.
So I appreciate you guys, as always. David Jones and Jeff Link. Big show tomorrow on the Scoreboard Radio. Tell us about it.
Yeah, highlights from this game and scores from around the area. We're going to kind of take a 1-month look back at the teams that we follow most and kind of say, okay, what have we learned about the teams in this area? I think we undershot a few teams. I think we overshot Burke County outside of Freedom. We got a former state champion in high school football, Vad Lee, who played collegiately at Georgia Tech and JMU. He's going to be on the show with us tomorrow, talk a little football, faith, and life. And so we're looking forward to that. That starts at 9 o'clock on Kicks 103.3 or online at gofoothills.com tomorrow morning.
Awesome, guys. Always appreciate it. Now we're going to take a break here on the HighSchoolOT postgame show brought to you by Talk It Out NC.
Don't fall for the myths. Get the facts about underage drinking.
Myth. Teens bounce back fast and teenage athletes can perform just fine after a night of drinking alcohol. The fact is, alcohol can hinder athletic performance for up to 3 days, delaying recovery and causing long-term issues with muscle loss and weakness. But don't just take it from me.
Choosing not to drink as an underage athlete has really helped me significantly. I've been able to focus, keep my priorities straight, and it's helped me separate myself from, many other people.
Get more facts at talkitoutnc.org.
Welcome back into the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC. Just like winning some of these big games that we have talked about tonight on the show, preventing underage drinking takes a lot of teamwork. Parents and teens, you can visit talkitoutnc.org. Again, that is talkitoutnc.org for the resources to start the conversation today about the risks of underage drinking. Join Talk It Out NC to cheer safe and make smart choices. We thank them again for sponsoring our statewide scoreboard and the High School OT postgame show, where we bring in Clay Best. We mentioned earlier in the show a big win for Greenhope tonight, 44-0 over Northern Durham, and that number 4 is really important for Coach Mitch Johnson and the Falcons. Clay, none of these kids were alive the last time Greenhope High School was 4-0 in a season.
Yes, because according to Coach Johnson, it has never happened in the 21-year history of the school. So quite the start. Another impressive performance tonight. Northern really struggled to do anything offensively against Greenhope. Ended up with, I think, one first down for Northern that was not by a penalty on the Falcons. A net loss of around 50 yards, I believe, offensively for Northern on the night. Yeah, I mean, yes, they're in 8A. Yes, it's a school that has not had great football success among its other many sports successes across fields over the 20 or so year history of the school, but we're going to have to start talking about Greenhope at some point. Of course, they start conference play next week against Apex Friendship, but just kind of their reaction tonight was excitement, not over excitement. It's one of those situations where you kind of feel like, hey, we're kind of getting used to this a little bit. We know how to win games. We know what we do well, and that is throw the ball down the field and then kind of come back underneath with Nicholas Goulet at quarterback leading an effective passing attack and just a lot of guys who believe in each other, believe in what they're doing, and are looking forward to seeing what they can do in this 8A conference when conference play starts next week.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting because for Coach Mitch Johnson, obviously one of the younger coaches in the state, he's had a couple of stops. This is now his second year with the Falcons, but you can tell like it's a really young group that they have, but those kids seem to really gravitate and buy into, what Coach Johnson is preaching over there at Greenhope. What do you think it is about this team that has allowed them to go 4-0? Obviously, they've scheduled well and given them a chance to compete in these games. But what is it about this team that you think is going to give them that confidence that they can hang around there in some of those conference games?
See, you look at this team, and they, with all due respect, they've kind of got. They're not a small team, but a lot of guys with basketball type builds. I say a lot of 6'3", 6'4" guys. Not an incredible amount of bulk. They've got some size. Of course, Donovan Holmes is a guy who had quite the night tonight with. He said he had 4 sacks. I had him on 5 or 6. I'm one of those that I try not. Sack statistics are so tough to gauge that I try to not depend a number on someone. But they know what they do well, and they stick to that. They trust each other. Very few tackles tonight defensively where it was one guy. I mean, even the sacks. Of course, you got Holmes making some plays. Guys like Eldarius Beasley made plays as well. Just a real team effort in the passing game as far as spreading the ball out a little bit. You had Jack Sloan had a big night tonight with 130 yards receiving. But just they kind of know what they do well, and it's going to be really interesting to see what, hey, does this carry over when you start playing a team like Friendship, and Coach Johnson telling the team afterwards that, hey, let's get ready to try to shock the world next week. So they know they're about to head into a different level of competition, and it's going to take even more when you get into this 8A conference play. But exciting time for sure for the Falcons.
Well, that is Clay Best. He was at Green Hope tonight as the Falcons, for the first time ever, 4-0 as a football program. A big win for Coach Johnson and the Falcons. You can catch Clay's story of that game tonight on HighSchoolOT.com. Thanks, Clay. We move on here on the High School OT post-game show. Let's take a couple of scores from around the 910 area code, starting with a thriller out at Jack Britt and Terry Sanford. The Buccaneers, down a few men, pick up a huge victory tonight over Terry Sanford, 42-38, the final in that one. St. Paul's escaping North Brunswick, 35-33. We talked to Leica Abibi earlier in the show as James Keenan picked up a 27-21 win over East Duplin. Scotland, a big victory against Overhills tonight, 49-26. Jacksonville wins big over Topsail, 46-6. Cape Fear defeating Westover 30-20. Pinecrest continuing to win. They had a close game last week against Davie County. No doubt tonight against Southview, 41-13. Northside, Jacksonville, a big win over New Hanover, 28-7. Whiteville, as Tim Hauer mentioned, is a team that can make some noise down in the 910 area, 44-0 over East Columbus. East Bladen sneaks past Clinton tonight, 26-20. South Brunswick, a big 28-7 win over Richlands. And then Pender and Wallace Rose Hill, a thriller, 30-26. I bring in Joel Bryant and James Moore from the Fayetteville Observer to talk more about the big Terry Sanford and Jack Britt game.
Hey, so James, last week we were talking here about how Jack Britt is a serious contender, and then tonight they prove it, I think, even further by beating Terry Sanford. Again, Terry Sanford defeated 71st to open the season, so we know Terry Sanford's legitimate. Your big impressions of Jack Britt tonight. I know they had a key player down.
Yes, they were without Javante Brooks, the star receiver. I feel like they proved their point. Like you said, they proved that they are top dogs. And man, it's gonna get really scary for the conference. I like Pinecrest. I like what Richmond's saying. We know who they are, but I think Jack Brick as a program is really they're really stepping forward and showing who they are and who they can be in tough competition. The biggest thing for me is when they do go into conference play, they've already played some of the hardest teams on this side of the 910. So I think that's pivotal for them. That is pivotal for their team. They have a lot of leaders. They have a lot of skilled guys who can really get after Emorian Towns and Eric Payne, two running backs. They're both probably 5'6", 5'7" at the most, really getting after it, scoring 2 touchdowns apiece. Having guys like that, having a solid game manager like Gavin Stokes, who's a leader, Liberty commit Jaleel Parker, who came out and scored on a 60-yard touchdown run on the sidelines, and it kind of erupted the score and kind of broke Terry Sanford's spirit. It seemed like in that third quarter. I'm sorry. And it just made a huge difference. It made a huge difference, and they really punched them in the mouth, especially without their star receiver.
So Terry Sanford is a 6A program. I'm sure you're not feeling any differently about them after tonight. After if they played Jack Britt well, and we're still expecting them to be competitive, right?
Yes. I'm expecting to be competitive. Honestly, I do have them win their conference as well. Yeah. I'm not worried about them. Just like you said, they put up 19 points in the fourth quarter. That just goes to show how electric the offense is and how great their coaching staff is. For one, the OC Jordan Van, he was a player. He knows the system. He is the system. You can never count guys like him out. You can never count Jacob Moore out. They have a lot of heavy hitters as well. Gavin Kraut, he showed out tonight. Jordan Browning made some exceptional catches late game. I just think Sebastian O'Keefe, I'd be remiss to not mention him. But like I said, we know who Terry Sanford is this far in the season, and they can just keep up that production, find a way to bounce back, next week, they'll be fine.
So obviously Jack Britt has been in these kind of shootouts, right? So we know they can get it done on offense. My question to you is, defensively, do you think it's just a matter of them playing really good teams, or do you think are there a couple of areas that you can see them kind of working on as the season goes along here that they kind of refine before we get the playoffs that can really kind of set them apart?
I think they have it. I'm not too concerned about the defense. You're right. They have given up almost 30, 40 points every game, as well as putting up 40 points a game.
Right.
But going to the 71st, Coach McLaurin over at 71st, he always talks about how the season really doesn't start to gel together, and teams don't really know exactly what they have until around week 10 or week 11. So when it gets to that point and they're still giving up 30, 40 points, then that's where I'll be a little bit concerned.
Yeah.
But as of right now, before we get in conference play, we haven't even had the open week yet. I think they'll be fine defensively. They get a few things together. As Coach Randolph says, just limit mistakes, unforced errors, and giving the other team penalties. I think that's really the biggest thing, and that's how Terry Sanford actually scored a couple times tonight off penalties.
Yeah, and again, it's been against good teams. They played a pretty good schedule here, quality-wise, so it could work itself out as we go along here. James, before we go, where are you thinking about going next week?
Next week, I'm leaning towards Jack Britt 71st. I hate to give them all the time 3 weeks in a row, but look.
Hey, yeah, that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you gotta go where the show is, right?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Awesome. Well, James, always appreciate your time tonight. Where can people find your workout?
Absolutely. You can go on 910 Preps on all social media platforms, and also check us out on the Fayetteville Observer.
Awesome, James. Appreciate it as always. We're going to stay in the 910. We're going to talk to Chris Miller from the Jacksonville Daily News up next. Chris, so big story for you tonight. Dixon starts off 4-0 with a big win tonight. Tell us all about the win, and then when is this the best start since when, Chris?
Yeah, this is their first 4-0 start in 12 years, and only the third time in history that they started out 4-0. Only the third victory over Southwest Lonzo in program history. Southwest still leads the series 41-3, but just a great win for Dixon. 578 yards of total offense for the Bulldogs, including 500 on the ground. If you know anything about the Dixon Bulldogs and Coach Kelly Davis, they run the old school single wing offense. So, as Southwest coach Zach Garvey called it last night, earlier tonight, we live in the year 2025, but they run a 1900 offensive style, but they make it work. And they're pretty excited. Dixon is 4-0 for the first time in 12 years, so they're pretty excited.
I think that's one of the cool things, Chris, about where we're at right now in the season. It's hard to think that we're a week away from being halfway done with the regular season, but this week 4 is kind of that sweet spot where there's some programs like Dixon. We just had Clay Best on the show with Green Hope, programs that don't often find themselves in this territory. And I think with the realignment, there was the opportunity for some of these teams to just wipe the schedule slate clean and find some games that, can really build up some good momentum for their programs. So that's awesome to see that from Dixon. Before we brought you on, we were going over some scores from the area, a couple big wins from some teams in Jacksonville. Obviously, the Cardinals picking up a 46-6 win, and then the Monarchs over at Northside picking up a big win over New Hanover there. As you kind of look at some scores and some results from around your area, what has stood out to you so far?
I think the White Oaks victory over Kinston
yes.
That was a shock. They were down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. I actually just got off the phone with White Oak coach Jonathan Bird probably about 20 minutes ago. They were down 26-12 in the fourth quarter at Kinston. Kinston
not easy to come back.
Yeah. Well, they got back in the game. They were down 26-18. They scored a touchdown in a 2-point conversion with 7 seconds left. Kinston gets the ball back. There's an untimed down because there's some penalties, and so in a desperation effort, Kinston does a hook and lateral.
Wow.
They fumble it. White Oak gets the tackle. They fumble it, and White Oak scoops and scores from 50 yards out. In the last play of the game, to win 32-26. So
unbelievable.
Yeah, a crazy ending. I mean, when you're down, I told Jonathan Bird, the White Oak coach, I said, look, man, no offense, I thought you guys were dead in the water. He goes, I don't like you, but I think everybody else in the state thought we were too. But he credited his kids for not giving up, and when you don't give up, crazy things will happen sometimes.
Yeah, there's been some really exciting starts to the season in your area. What are you looking forward to the most next week in Week 5?
I think the game of the week, it did take a little bit of a hit tonight with East Duplin losing to James Keenan.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a shock. I really thought East Duplin would play well and get a victory there, but credit James Keenan. But Jacksonville's at East Duplin next week. They've had some pretty good back and forth matchups over the last maybe 5-10 years or so when they have played. So it's been a good series. Two of the best coaches, Bo Williams from Jacksonville and Battle Holly for the Panthers of East Duplin. So I would suspect the Panthers will come back motivated and ready to play hard. And if you're Jacksonville, they took care of business tonight against winless Topsail, and we'll see how they do kind of going forward. So I would think that's probably the game of the week next week.
Well, J. Mike and Blake and I were talking yesterday, actually, a little bit about Jacksonville soccer, where they kind of stand in terms of what they can do this season. What are some, kind of what their goals are in like 6A? Because I think J. Mike saw J.H. Rose last night, but where can people see some of your coverage over the next week as you really start to lock in on maybe some volleyball, some soccer, some other sports, and then obviously gearing up for that big matchup next Friday night?
Yeah, well, Jacksonville soccer coming off a big victory at Northside on Thursday. I was there. Northside was 5-0-1, and there was a little bit of emotions in that fixture between two good rivals. But Jacksonville found a way to win 3-0. Look, they're 3-2-2. They play a tough schedule, so they'll be just fine once you get in the playoffs. Visit jdnews.com for I'm working on a reaction story for Dixon now. Just posted a photo gallery of photos I took. Waiting for photos for the Jacksonville game from one of my photographers, and we'll have a roundup. People love those roundups, so I'll get that up as soon as I can as well.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you as always, Chris.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
That is Chris Miller from the Jacksonville Daily News joining us here on the High School OT post-game show. As I had mentioned, or as Chris had mentioned, there was that just wild finish in that Kinston White Oak game. That was among some scores in the 2-5-2. We're going to go across the state to the mountains, look at the 8-8 scoreboard. That is where Hickory got a big win over Newton Conover. We had talked to the guys from Scoreboard Radio, Jeff and David. Freedom, a close win over TC Robertson tonight, 20-14. Swain County picked up a narrow victory over Mountain Heritage. That is a big win for Swain County, 16-14 in that one. AC Reynolds, they shook off a slow start against Murphy to win 34-14. Maiden, they continue to roll. They had been in a couple of close games early in the season. They have no problem with Bunker Hill tonight, 49-0. Irwin and Hendersonville were in overtime. That game is now gone final. You can find the final score on the High School OT Talk It Out NC statewide scoreboard. Just go to highschoolot.com. Right there on the front page is the Talk It Out NC scoreboard. Asheville against Asheville School. That is correct. Asheville against Asheville School. 39-21 the final there. West Henderson, a big win over Owen tonight, 37-15. Robbinsville, a big win over Mitchell, 35-6. Pisgah picking up a 2-score win over Smoky Mountain. Christ School defeating Concord Christian, 46-24. And Chase with a 30-15 victory over Madison. Again, if you have not already, you can flip over to WRIL TV. Joel Bryant is about to join Chris Lee on WRL TV's Football Friday. Chris has they've been caught up in some of the news that was happening at Tarboro. We had mentioned what happened there between Tarboro and Southwest Edgecombe. Pat Welcher was there kind of giving some of the breaking news from that game. And, we can continue to kind of go around the state, look at some of the top triangle area scores with Chris and Joel. We are going to continue to move along here on our Talk It Out NC statewide scoreboard. Look at some 2-5-2 scores. We had J. Mike Blake on earlier in the show. He had the Alpaca Peruvian Chicken game of the week on High School OT, and it was a 41-32 victory for Northeastern over Wilson Prep. West Craven picking up a 43-15 win over Farmville Central. Southern Nash 35-15 over Nash Central. Rocky Mount had no problem with Vance County. The Gryphons continue to roll 41-14, the final in that one. An exciting one between Green Central and North Pitt. The Rams escape. They have had a hot start to the season, 40-36 there. Laney, as Tim Hauer had mentioned, 31-15 over South Central. Garner, a big win, 50-19 over D.H. Conley. That is a Vikings team that had some impressive wins earlier in the season, including one over Northeastern. Chris Miller had just mentioned White Oak, a walk-off scoop and score to defeat Kinston tonight, 32-26. That was an incredible finish there. Hunt was up 2 scores on South Garner at last check. Again, you can get that final score or report it on HighSchoolOT.com if you have the final there. That is on the Talk It Out NC scoreboard. We keep it rolling with Aiden Grifton, 38-13 winners over North Lenoir. J.H. Rose, 21-14 over Havelock, and Currituck in a shootout, 56-46 over Holmes. Holmes drops to 0-4 in the season, but a big win for Currituck in that one. Just a couple more scores to go over here as we roll down to the end of the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC. We're actually going to head out to the 336 area code now and look at what some of the top scores in that region were. Reagan falling tonight to Northern Guilford, 20-10. Another big win for the Nighthawks. They are slowly stacking some impressive victories this season. You know, Reagan last week shut out Reedsville, and Northern Guilford was that team that rallied from behind in the fourth quarter in week 1 to defeat Reedsville. Well, tonight, the Nighthawks 20-10 over the Raiders. Davie County, we mentioned earlier when we were going through the 910 scores, Pinecrest had a big win tonight. Well, Pinecrest just squeaked by Davie County last week. This time, it's Davie County's turn. They get a 27-26 win over Oak Grove. Dudley, in front of a packed house at Northeast Guilford, wins 21-19. That was a heated battle there, and the Panthers kind of pounded the ball on the ground and picked up the 21-19 win. A huge win here. Southern Alamance in a cross-county battle with Southeast Alamance. They win 35-6. Walkertown, a high-scoring affair with East Surrey, and it's Walkertown who escapes 40-35 with the victory there. More high-scoring. This was an undefeated battle. High Point Christian, 56-35 over Harrell's Christian. Two teams that entered 3-0. Here's something you don't hear often. Mount Airy is on a losing streak, 2 in a row now for the Granite Bears as they fall to Jefferson Forest from Virginia, 42-7 the final there. Central Davidson in a tight battle with North Davidson. That was a really highly anticipated matchup. Central Davidson escaping with the win, 20-17. A thriller, Ashboro, Rockingham County. It's the Blue Comets who escape in overtime, 31-30 there. Eastern Randolph, they have no problem with Providence Grove this evening, 41-3, a big week 4 victory for the Wildcats. Richmond, they take on Northwest Guilford and bounce back from last week's loss to Rollsville with a 42-21 victory over the Vikings. And then Forbush facing off with Elkin. The Falcons win that one, 41-28. Those are some of your scores from different regions around the state of North Carolina. We thank you for joining us on tonight's Week 4 edition of the High School OT postgame show presented by Talk It Out NC. A reminder, for this goes for students, parents, peers. There's never a bad time to start the conversation to stop underage drinking. Get the help that you need to talk openly and honestly about underage drinking, peer pressure, and more with our partners at Talk It Out NC. You can visit Talk It Out NC. Again, that is talkitoutnc.org to start the conversation today and stop underage drinking. That is very important. And again, you can go on highschoolot.com, learn more about Talk It Out NC. And while you're there, you can view the Talk It Out NC statewide scoreboard, the state's most up-to-date source for high school sports scores in North Carolina. For Evan Moesta, Joel Bryant, J. Mike Blake, and the rest of the staff that were out for High School OT tonight, we wish you a very happy Week 4 and a great weekend here from High School OT.